Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Squid and Ultimate Leaf Band Show, brought to you by the Hockey News. Established in 1947 with over 2 million dedicated readers, the Hockey News is the authoritative source of hockey and the #1 publication in North America. With an ever-growing podcast network and video database on top of an already established print and digital brand, the Hockey News is there to cover all the major hockey stories from around the world. Visit thn.com/deal to get the best value on subscriptions to the Hockey News. I'm Mike Wilson, the Ultimate Leafs fan, and joining me as always, my co-host, Ricky Squid Vibe. How's things going, Squid?
Fantastic, Mike. Couldn't be better. A little windy on the golf course this morning, though. It was a tough day on the course. Ended up with an 80, so not one of my better games, but I'm blaming it on the wind.
Well, come on. It's that time of the year. There should be a 7 in front of that number a little more regular there, mister. Come on. Well, let me tell you my story last night. So we've had 2 weeks of playing hockey. We played at York University, and we were allowed to go into dress room 20 minutes before and 50 minutes after. Last night we played at Angus Glen in Markham. And the next player here complained about hockey, playing inside the bubble. Okay, I think I'll strangle the guy. We go last night. They made us dress outside. So here you got 16 guys, which was the maximum, standing out there, getting fully dressed in the parking lot. Now, on the way up, there is a torrential downpour. So just think about that in the middle of October, okay? And you've got to go, and then you go into the rink, and outside where the rink is, they've got seats, individual chairs to sit on and put your skates, and then you go on the ice. And when you leave the rink, you can take your skates off and you get changed back in the parking lot. So you got to love the game to be playing things along these levels, but hopefully things will ease off somewhat moving forward. So remember that when you play your next Legends game.
Well, I don't know if we'll be playing any games for the foreseeable future, but hopefully we will. But, you got to put butts in the seats. Otherwise, we can't play these games. And so hopefully we will, but I can't see it happening before the new year.
Yeah, so, it is what it is. And speaking of which, we walk right into this. We've got 3 Game 7 set coming up over the next couple of days. We have a couple tonight. And what do you think?
Well, you got 3 Game 7s, but you got 3 Game 7s, teams that were all down 3-1 and have come back to tie it up. So, do those teams have the momentum going into the 7th game, or do some of the other teams that had the lead, are they going to be able to come back and play the way they did to get that 3-1 lead? And I'm not sure because, you look at Philadelphia, look at Vancouver, of course, they're getting fantastic goaltending. They're being outshot quite a bit by Vegas, but the momentum's on the side of those teams that were down 3-1 and were able to come back. I think anyway, and it's going to make for exciting 3 Game 7s, I think.
Well, you look at Colorado, and there's old ex-Leaf Michael Hutchinson starring in goal for the Avs. Boy, it didn't look like it the other night when he let that one in from the top of the red circle. That boy eluded his glove. You thought, uh-oh. But it just seems to be the Avs have dug deeper down and seem to be playing so tough in front of them. They seem almost like they're just destined to win.
Yeah, I think so. And I guess probably when they were 3 teams down 3-1, I would have said the most likely team to come back and win the series would be Colorado. Never thought Vancouver would come back, and nor did I think that Philly would come back either. So, but they have, and you know what? Hey, I'll be watching because that's exciting, Game 7s. I don't care if it's the first round, second round, third round, or the finals. Game 7s are always great.
And here we are with no fans in the building, and usually teams play for a Game 7 just to set themselves up like this. So we're really going to be put to the test tonight and tomorrow when we watch how these teams handle it. And of course, we have Tampa Bay sitting watching all this for the last few days.
Yeah.
Mentally, how's this going to affect these guys sitting back, having not played for a few days and going back to practice?
Well, it's like I said, I think it hurts you a little bit when you get into that first game, the next round, and maybe the half of the next game, the second game. But don't forget, it also allows some of your players to get healthy, that are banged up to start feeling a little bit better. So it's kind of a good thing and a bad thing. I would prefer to, have 1 or 2 days off and then get right back into it. But I think giving the players an opportunity that are banged up to start feeling a little bit better, I think is a good thing for Tampa.
Well, we're certainly going to watch with some real interest, and it should be great for the next couple of days. Hockey fans are getting exactly what they want, Game 7s right across the board, and it's sure going to be exciting. So speaking of exciting, we've got the second part of our interview with Dave Hanson. We're going to talk about the movie today, Slapshot, which is fans and viewers, you guys want to sit and listen to this. It is pretty funny. So we'll turn it over to Dave here now, and we'll talk to you guys in a few minutes. Okay, so Dave, obviously, it was a very colorful league, a lot of colorful characters. And I mean, well, Squid, what about you? I mean, you're coming from junior hockey to all these crazy guys around you. What was it like for you?
Oh, well, it was a big awakening, I'll tell you that, right from the very beginning. And watching the stuff that went on. And of course, we got labeled as the Wrong Brothers, Pat Reagan and I, who lived together. And then Craig Hartsburg and Rob Ramage were the Wright brothers, and Brof was the one that named us that because we couldn't seem to do anything right. We'd always get in trouble and so on and so forth. But anyway, talking with Dave, you guys are talking about Notre Dame and University of Minnesota. What about Miami, Ohio? When Christian played against my son Justin, I mean that was a lot of fun watching those games.
Yeah.
I think Anders Lee might have been there too, was he not?
No, I think Anders was after. Maybe Christian Senior. No, Anders. I don't think Anders was there. I think he was after Christian left.
But they always had a good battle when they played against one another. That they both had good teams, and it was fun to watch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, guys. I think the listeners and the viewers are going to want to get into the part we want to talk about now is the movie. They obviously lots and lots. We could talk to Dave for hours about the minor leagues and the stuff that went on in WHA and NHL. But the movie. Just to briefly go through it, see if I got this right. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Dave. But Nancy Dowd had a brother Ned who you played with in Johnstown. He was playing in the minor leagues. He would recite stories to her about what was happening in the league and some of the craziness that was going on. So I guess her creative juices were flowing, and she decided to come and follow her brother for a few weeks on the road and jot down some of the things that were happening and see if she could formulate this in some sort of film story or something along the lines. And I think after spending a few weeks, this kind of led to the beginning of the movie. Is that kind of how it all came together?
Yeah, it was. According from what I think Ned might have told me, how it really came about was she was a writer in L.A. A female, obviously female success, but one of the few female successful writers at the time, and Ned was talking to her one night. I think Ned, he probably won't admit it, but it doesn't make it part of a story. But knowing Ned, it was during a drunken stupor. And just started saying, you can't believe, this town, what's going, the mills are closing. We got these guys on this hockey team. We ride the Iron Lung all over the country, on and on. And they're talking about selling the team. And again, I think her famous line was, well, who owns the team? And he says, I don't know who owns the team. So obviously, if you think about Denny Lemieux saying, who owns? Obviously that must have come from that. But so she took a trip up and spent a little time, and then the rest of the season we would occasionally catch Ned in either the back of the bus or in the corner of the bar room talking into his hands, and come to realize that he's recording stories about what's either going on or what had happened, and sending these little tapes off to Nancy to use, to help foster more of what she put together, which was a phenomenal script. So,
yes.
So yeah, that was kind of the genesis, I believe, of how it got started.
And then George Roy Hill, obviously, is no amateur director, gets brought in to put this movie together. And so, I mean, this is a guy who's famous for Butch Cassidy, the Sundance Kid, and The Sting. So, I mean, a couple of iconic films. So, Dave, for our listeners, once again, how did you actually get involved in the movie, and how did the Hanson brothers come to be?
Well, and just a side note, George Roy Hill was a Minnesota boy from the Twin City areas.
Oh, so
Surprisingly, though, yeah, but surprisingly, I don't think he knew anything about hockey. But he certainly had a great sense of humor. So as you know, as it was told to me, Ned Dowd, this 74-75 season was Ned played for us. We won the league championship. We had the Carlson brothers, myself. You mentioned all that, and that was the year that Nancy came and kind of fouled things. When Universal Studios bought the script, they actually hired Ned to come down to LA and try to help find actors who could skate well enough to portray the hockey players. So I think they put out a casting call, and they had, they really had some established A-listed actors like Nick Nolte, Peter Strauss, John Travolta, Donnie Most from Happy Days, and on come out and in front of Ned and skate. I guess they had a kind of an audition on ice kind of thing, and they even they really wanted these guys to play these roles, and they couldn't skate. And Ned would work with them and try to get them, and they just got to the point, I think, where in fact Peter Strauss broke an ankle slamming into the board. Somebody broke a nose. Finally, Ned just says, no matter what I do with these guys, they're not going to meet the expectations of what you want in this film. Mm-hmm. And so I suspect it was either Ned or Nancy went back and says, why don't we go back to Johnstown? These guys are characters themselves. Let them be their own characters, right? Yeah. So this now was the 75-76 season. From what I remember, a couple of them came into town. They pulled Jeff, Steve, and myself into a hotel room. By that time, Jack was in Edmonton playing with the Edmonton Oilers. And they kind of gave us some lines to read, and we read them. And in spite of that, when I think they were shocked that we could read, they said, okay, let's give it a go. So really, initially the plan was to have Jeff, Jack, and Steve Carlson be the Hanson brothers, and Dave Hanson to be Killer Carlson. Yeah. With Jack out, when it came around to start filming, they threw me in as the third brother. And ironically, I happened to be a Hanson, but they just left it that way, and then we were off and running.
Now, Paul Newman, who got the part, he did a couple movies with George. So I mean, that was part of the connection there. But he wasn't selected first off. Now, could he actually skate? And also, the second part of this is, did he know anything about the game? And I guess thirdly, I'd add to it, you have a pretty funny story of how you first met Paul Newman.
Well, yeah, to your point, I don't think Paul was not the first actor casted to be Reggie Dunlap. I think it was Al Pacino. And when George Ray Hill, as the story was told to me, in a meeting with Pacino, they started talking about the film and so forth, so on. And George says, well, can you skate? Pacino says, well, no. But we can work the script around, and started wanting to try to rework the script and this and that. And so basically, I think George fired Pacino, and he had a relationship with Paul, knew Paul could skate coming out of Ohio. And as I was told to me again, he grabbed Paul one morning, they went out on the curb, sat down, probably having their cold coffees, and George pitched the idea to him, and Paul grabbed it right away. He said, perfect, great. So to answer your question, Paul could skate. Was he, he certainly wasn't at the professional level, or even, Michael Onkeen, who played Ned Braden, All-American at New Hampshire, stepped right in, could skate, keep up with us, had everything. Mm-hmm. Paul could skate, but he struggled. In fact, I think he might have worn the old Micron boots, or those plastic boots back then, to help his ankle support. But, but he was an athlete. You could see he was an athlete, mm-hmm. And he would go out and skate. What he didn't know what to do was what to do with a hockey stick. He never played hockey, never had a hockey stick in his hand. And so he came to us and says, what do I do? And we started teaching him how to handle a stick in his hand. And he would go off and he would work at it to the point where, he then came across the screen looking pretty darn good.
Yeah. Now, how did you meet him for the first time?
Yeah, well, that story is...
That's a good one.
Yeah, so they actually started filming before we even finished the playoffs. Mm-hmm. And so we're playing games, and they would watch the games up, from the press box, and we had no idea they were there. At least I didn't have any idea there. So we're in the playoffs. We're playing against Philadelphia, and I'm having a pregame nap, and I'm rooming with I think Boudreaux was one of my roommates, and Henry Taylor was the other roommate. And there's a banging on the door, and I'm kind of in a. And I'm like asleep, stupor, and I hear it some more, and I finally get up, and I'm pissed off because I got to get out of, I get out of the room, and I'm in my underwear and my dirty white socks and nothing else, and I open the door. Well, you walked up a set of stairs and then stepped up to get into our apartment. Mm-hmm. So I open the door, and I'm looking at eye level, and then I look down, and there's this guy standing there, and he's looking up at me. And I'm thinking he's probably looking right up at my crotch because he's that low. And he says, "Oh, geez, did I wake?" And I says, "Yeah." And he says, "Well," and he puts his hand. He says, "Sorry." He says, "You Dave?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, I'm Paul Newman." And it was kind of like, "Oh, yeah, I guess you are." We shook hands. He says, "I'm sorry." He says, "But do you mind? I got guys from the movie set. They want the art department. They want to come in and look at your apartment, what a hockey player's apartment looks like, this and that." And I said, "Listen, Paul, I don't care." I said, "But I'm going back to bed. Just close the door when you leave." He says, "Sounds like a deal." And I start walking away. He says, "Hey, by the way, Dave," he says, "Do you got any beer in the fridge?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Grab what you want." He says, "Well, good." He says, "Because I want to go sit down and watch the races are on TV right now. I'm going to go sit down and watch." So, that was it. For all I know, I don't remember, but he probably drank all my beer and left.
So
it's funny you talk about that movie, Paul Newman, and the whole movie. I mean, I don't know how many times I've watched it on buses when I was coaching in the minors and so on. But I mean, that was really, it was what hockey was like in the minors at that level in those times. It really was. It was, I both told a lot of stories about back in the old Eastern League and things that happened. And I don't think people realize that movie was very, very close to what it was like in the Eastern League back then in those days. Am I correct?
Oh, you're absolutely right. You could literally go to almost every hockey scene there, or actually, for that matter, probably almost every scene in a movie, and that's the way it was. The only thing that was really out there, I can never ever remember anybody strip teasing on the ice to the band playing in the stands. But everything leading up to that, the brawls and warm-ups, going into the stands, getting thrown in jail, guys getting hit off the boards and probably pissing all over themselves. The locker room banter, the bar room banter. That was it. That was it in that league. And that's what I tell people. I says, you watch that movie, there's more fact than fiction in that movie. It's just that the fact is, stretched a little bit for humor. But yeah, it's good. That's the way it was. And it was probably the most fun time of my life. Again, I'm 20 years old. I'm making $200 a week, which means I got more money in my pocket than I ever had. And I'm just playing for the love of the game and having a blast doing it. And that's how it came across in the film.
So the reason I say that is because both told a lot of stories. But I was playing junior at the time. We used to have brawls in the warm up, and everybody was fighting and so on. So it was the game. That's just the way the game was back then. And I don't think a lot of people realize, watching today's game, that hockey was like that at one point. And I lived it. Played junior and even in Birmingham in 78, 79, it was very similar.
Oh, we even, and again, you can equate parts of it to the movie, but we won a playoff round because we literally had a bench clearing brawl and the team in warm-ups, and the team refused to come out to play the game. And it was the third game of the best of three. And so literally the team forfeited. They got in their bus and they drove back to Buffalo, and we got awarded the win of the first round of the series.
That doesn't happen every day.
No.
Now, how much did they rely on you guys for authenticity of the scene? You're kind of touching on it, but the day would come to you and say, is this how it should be done, or would this really happen, or does this not really happen in the movie or in a game?
Well, one of the great things about that script and what Nancy did it really was authentic. I mean, she was such a genius and so observant and such a great writer that the language and the tone and the rhythm and everything that went in there was the way it was.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is when the Hanson brothers first started filming in front of the camera, is we were hockey players, we were not actors. And I can remember sitting when we first got on and we had to say words. It was the three of us, and they set the scene up, and we had our lines, and George Roy Hill says action, and we say the lines, and we get through them, and then he says cut, and he says, okay guys, let's give that one more try, and action. Well, after about, I don't know, 7-8 times of those, he finally says, okay, hey guys, let's take about a 5-minute break on the set and reset up, so forth. And so he sat down next to us, he says, boys, he says, let me say this clearly, it ain't working. He says, now, the scene, the situation, I know you know the lines. He says, but what would you say, or what would you do, or what would come to mind in this situation if it was real?
Mm-hmm.
And we said, what? We don't know. We just whatever came to mind at the time. He says, okay. He says, keep that thought. We get back up. He says, action, and we do our lines. Well, we just rattle off a bunch of lines. He says, perfect. That's a keeper. We don't need to do any more. And from now on, that's what I guys want you to do. So he would, we had our lines, and most of the lines were, like I said, they were perfect. But he gave us the freedom to ad lib as hockey players, and certainly the Hanson brothers were kind of a unique group to begin with. And, we would oftentimes, but the neat thing about that is George then recognized, you had the actors who were acting to be hockey players.
Yeah.
But those guys are so good, like Dave's a killer, Dave's a mess. That was an ad lib from Alan Nichols, and he had the freedom George gave us the freedom to do that. And if it didn't work, he'd tell us it didn't work. It'd be like, okay, say your lines. But that's how it went. And, we would do, the hockey scenes. He would ask us here and there. But Ned Dowd was the on-set hockey coordinator. So he had that benefit of, being able to help set things up and make it flow like a real hockey scene.
So now you guys are sitting around all day, and there's always this talk about, I've done a couple commercials, and you arrive at 7 a.m. and you may get one line and you've got to wait 8 hours all day to say it. And it gets pretty boring. I mean, you guys are hockey players. I mean, how would you guys put up with that every day? I mean, after a while, did you just lose your patience, say, this is enough, come and get us over in the trailer, we're over here drinking beer or something?
Well, absolutely, Mike, you're right on. Because again, keep in mind, we're 20, I think Steve was, 19, 20, 21 was our ages, from Minnesota.
Yeah.
And, back then, unlike players now, you didn't spend the summer training, so you went into training camp in shape. You spent the summer going back home to Minnesota playing softball, drinking beer, and eating onion rings, and then you go to training camp to get in shape.
Yep.
That was the routine. So here we are. The season's over with, and again, traditionally we pack up our suitcase and our race cars, and we'd head back home. Well, here we are. To your point, we're up at 6 a.m. having to be on set, get through makeup, sit around, wait to do your scene. You'd wait, and then often you'd get to be 6, 7 o'clock at night, and they didn't get to you. And and this went on, and then of course when you're shooting the scenes, it's a lot of fun because you're doing things even though you're still waiting. But you couldn't go outside and wait, because they would have fear that you'd get a sunburn or suntan, and then one scene you'd have your winter skin on. Your pale winter skin, and then all of a sudden the next scene you look like you came from Ratona Beach, you spent a week, so you couldn't, so you were stuck in that friggin' stinking arena all day long or wherever you're at. So, we got to the point where, okay, 12 o'clock, nothing's happening. Hey, let's go get a 6-pack of beer. Okay. So we pop a beer here and there, Next day, it turned into a case, and it turned into a tub of beer, and then a couple times it'd get to, 5 o'clock, and George Roy Hill would say, okay, let's bring on the Hanson. We go out there, and we'd be so shit-faced by that time. George would look at us and says, okay, that's a wrap. We'll do this tomorrow.
So did you have to
Now,
tell
was
the director?
this
Go ahead, Squid.
was this all filmed in Johnstown, right at the old rink?
Yeah, the vast majority of, well, Johnstown War Memorial, the Cambria County War Memorial was
Yeah.
the home rink. So most of it was filmed there. And of course, the town, the steel mills and all that was there. And then we shot some in Utica, New York at the Utica
yeah.
Arena there. And we shot some down in Syracuse at, I think it's called the Onondaga or something like that. And then we shot down at Colgate College and we shot a scene down at Old Millbury's old stomping ground.
So
I've been in all those buildings, so it brought back a lot of memories. I coached in the ECHL. In fact, we played Johnstown in the playoffs and in the first round of 1 year and best of 5 and won that series. And but driving up to Johnstown on the old iron lung, as you said, and we would go on 3 days. We'd go to 3 different cities, and we'd be traveling 8 or 9 hours, 10 hours all night long, and playing the next day, then another 10 hours, and then another game. I was exhausted. And I said, I don't know how the heck these guys do it, but they go out and they play their asses off every single night. And I said, I don't know how they do it because I'm exhausted. So anyway, I thought that was pretty cool going to see those rinks. And then later on, seeing them in a movie, and especially with you.
Well, hey, now, David, did you guys like as this movie's being filmed and you guys are going along? I mean, now, be honest here. Did you guys have any idea that this thing would kind of have not the legs it had, but that it would be some success?
We were clueless to the point, Mike, where other people did.
Yep.
But we finished the filming. Like I said, I got married literally, I think, less than a month later. Went back to Minnesota, was getting ready for training camp. And by playing softball, drinking beer, and eating onion rings. But got contacted before camp. The 3 of us, Steve, Jeff, and I, got contacted before camp by Universal Studios saying, listen, we want to sign you guys to a 7-year movie deal. Want to do a movie every year with you guys for the next 7 years. Make you guys Hollywood stars, movie stars. And like the brainiacs that we are, we go, well, no, we don't want to be movie stars. We're hockey players. Duh. And so but we try to say, well, listen, maybe if you can guarantee us that the only time you'll film is the off season, won't interfere with our hockey season, and they couldn't do that. So, we went on to pursue our movie careers. But, you think about it back then, the only way you watched the movies was either in the theater or on TV. Mm-hmm. They didn't have the VCRs,
That's right.
They didn't have cable, none of that. So it would run through the theater portion of its life, and then get stuck on the shelf. And and I think we set the record for F-bombs in a movie, so it was never going to get on TV anytime through. And really, it wasn't until the VCR was invented and the VHS tapes came out that suddenly it became a phenomenon. I think it was like in the top 3 rented movies of all time at the time. And, really it just hasn't stopped.
No, it's the best hockey movie of all time. And, well, you maybe missed your calling. You said you got married that one summer. Now, you married a coal miner's daughter. Now, you may have been ahead of your time because there's a famous movie that came out a couple of years later called A Coal Miner's Daughter. So, Dave, maybe you missed your calling as a movie star. Maybe these little signs were all coming at you. Now, how the other actors on the set treat you guys? And Paul Newman, did he hang around with you guys at all? And I'm sure he probably did, because it sounds like he was a decent guy. Any funny stories with Paul that you guys had?
Well, you talk to any of those actors now, like we get together every once in a while and I'll do things here and there. And they all say that, these guys had, like Jerry Hauser had a, very successful career in TV and in movies, and as did, On Keene and even Alan Nichols and Brad Sullivan and, some of those professional actors. And when Newman was alive, anytime he got asked, they all said, including Newman, it was the most fun they've ever had making a film. And I really believe it's because, the Hanson brothers really kind of broke down the stigma of these actors having to come in and just be straight-laced actors worried about their jobs, because we were pulling pranks left and right on everybody. And if you didn't buy into it, you were just the next guy that was going to get it even worse the next time. And Newman was one of the biggest pranksters of them all.
So like what? Give us an example of something that was done.
Well, I can tell you that. Here's a good one. So when Paul came into town, I think it was the local hotel, I think at the time it was called the Sheridan Hotel. So, everybody, even us guys that kept our places, they also still gave us hotel rooms because you'd work late at night or sometimes you'd work overnight, and it was convenient to be right there in a hotel room. So Paul not only had a hotel room, but he also had an RV, his own RV on the side. And then they rented one of the local, actually it was a team doctors, a heart surgeon doctors, a house up in Westmont, up on the hill. But when he came into town, he had a small sauna built at the hotel exclusively for him, because Paul liked to drink his beer, and then he'd go in and sweat it out in the morning, and probably swam in the pool, I guess. But well, one of the bars we used to frequent was in that hotel bar, and so Jeff, I think it was Jeff, myself, and I suspect Steve, because he was always with us too. One night, late at night, we snuck into the back of the room and grabbed these big bags of popcorn. And we took them out to Paul's sauna, and we filled this sauna full of popcorn. I mean, literally, it was, this high, and shoved the door closed. Just, envisioning that when Paul opens that door in the morning, all this popcorn's going to come out, and this and that, and he's going to come back to the set and, bitch about it. So the next day, we're back on set. Not a word. He didn't say a word. Didn't lead on. Had no idea, and this happened and happened. So we're thinking to ourselves, did it happen? Did it not happen? It had to happen, So we're shooting a scene up in Ligonier or Latrobe, Pennsylvania, and they got a little in-town community circle where the road comes into town and goes around, and right before we shoot that scene, and that's the scene where we hang our butts out the window. But before that scene is when the bus pulls off, the team bus pulls off the side of the road, the booster bus pulls up behind it, and all these people, we start swapping buses, and we're grabbing the girls and bringing them on and this and that. So it's one of those nights again, Mike, where we're sitting, we're waiting, we start drinking the beer, we're getting half lit. And we come up with this brilliant idea, and we go up to Paul and says, "Hey, we got a brilliant idea." Paul's going, yeah, what? He says, all those people on the other buses, it's all lawyers' wives, doctors' wives from the hometown, all these high women. He says, how about when the buses stop and we go running out of the bus, before we run out, we take all our clothes off, and we run out, we're bare-ass naked, and we jump up and down and laugh. Won't that be funny? Paul goes, yeah, I'm with you. Let's do it. So we're in the back of the bus. We're stripping our clothes down. We hear action, on the walkie-talkie. The buses are rolling down. We go just running past, thinking Paul's right behind us. We go running out. The other team group is coming off their bus. We're running up and down, jiggling this and that, laughing. Now we're thinking it's midnight. It's in this small town in the middle of nowhere. And the only people who's going to be there is a few people from the crew and this and that. We stop. We look around. I got to believe the entire town was there. Grandma, grandpa, grandchildren, and we're looking, and we're bare-ass naked, and we're covering ourselves up, and we're looking, and Paul's nowhere to be found. And we look up, and there he is hanging out the window, laughing, saying, "Payback's a bitch, boys. Payback's a bitch."
Hey, now, Dave, well, that is a pretty good one. Now, one thing we forgot to talk about is the Hanson brothers with the cars in the hotel room and the racing cars. God. And all, like, you came up with that, or is that actually something you guys did or somebody did?
Well, again, it falls into that category, more fact than fiction. So we lived in a house just down the street from the War Memorial. I mean, literally, we walked back and forth to practice and to the games.
Yep.
And the house was a 3-story house. We had landlords on the first floor. On the second floor, it was the 3 Carlsons. And on the third floor was Guido Tanisi, who played Pretty Boy Billy Charlebois, and myself. And so, as Squid will tell you, that league, we called it No Sunshine League because you spent all the time on the bus. You're either sleeping on the bus, traveling on the bus, and getting off, play the games, getting back on the bus, and going again. So when we had time off, which was often a Sunday in town, well, I think pretty much all the bars shut down on Sunday. So what we did in the house is we went and bought a race car set. And we would, up on my floor, I pushed all the furniture aside. We had a living room, and we set the racetrack up. And the Carlsons and Guido and I, we would sit up there and we would race cars and drink beer. And that was our entertainment. And it got to the point where, suddenly the husbands on the team, the teammates who, wanted to get away from their wives, they'd come over, and it turned into a big, every once in a while we'd have a big race car tournament going on and drinking beer. So Nancy took that obviously a step further, and we brought our toys on the road with us, played with our toys then.
That's a classic, because that's a classic scene from the movie.
Boy.
Squid, have you got anything else for Dave before we've taken up so much of his time? Anything else?
Yeah, my wife's got the pork chops ready here. She's giving me the evil eye here. So.
Okay, well, we're getting close.
I just want to say that it was a pleasure having you on, Dave, and I really enjoyed playing with you for that 1 year, and I've got to meet your son a number of times. He's a gentleman and a great kid. I call him a kid because I'm a lot older than he is. And he plays in some of our alumni games, and we have a blast. So thank you very much, and thanks for being a teammate, because I really enjoyed it.
Well, and you protected him too, Dave, of course, because look, you saved that face.
Yeah.
Okay, so come on, Squid.
Yeah.
So Dave,
all I can tell you, Mike, is his nose wasn't that big when I played with him. Or crooked.
Well, listen, Christian, obviously, I've got to know Christian over the last couple of years. Great guy, as I said. When you guys, if you ever get back into Toronto, the two of you, let Squid and I buy you lunch, and he can pay.
Yeah.
How about that?
Right. Right.
Me?
Yeah. He had deep pockets then. He's got deep pockets now. Short arms.
Listen, okay, great, Dave. Been a pleasure. Thanks.
Hey,
so much.
Likewise, fellas. Anytime.
Okay.
I really
Thanks a
enjoyed
lot,
it.
Dave.
All right,
Great
guys.
having
That's
it.
all
Thanks,
I'm talking
Eddie.
to you, Ricky.
Talk to you soon.
Likewise.
Bye-bye.
Bye, boys.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, Squid, he's sure a character, Mr. Hanson. I mean, can you just imagine? I mean, we're only getting a sniffle of what really went on in those days. And if you sat Dave down and had a coffee or beer with him one day, can you imagine some of the stories that these guys will have? And as a matter of fact, we got another ex-teammate of yours joining us next week, Bruce Boudreau, who was a part of that Johnstown Jets team. So I'm sure that Gabby will have a couple of things to add to an already pretty lively conversation we had, Dave. But just what a character, what a great guy. And I'm sure just you played with him as a teammate. I'm sure just the type of guy you would go through a wall for.
You know what? Absolutely. I mean, Dave was a true professional. He was a great teammate. He knew his role too. That was what I loved about Dave was he would even talk to the guys and say, listen, if you're going to get involved in anything, I'll be there. Don't worry. I'll be there to help you out. And, I mean, when a guy tells you that's a good teammate. That he knows what he's supposed to be doing out there.
And especially Michel Goulet, I'm sure he found out when you tried to teach him boxing lessons. I love that story. So just forget it. I'll look after you. You just stay out of the way. So you gotta love all of that. And of course, Christian is another great kid. Plays with you guys in some of the alumni games, as we understand. The next league, Notre Dame. Just a great family all around, and loved having him as a guest. And obviously, we'll try and get Dave on again at somewhere down the road. So it wouldn't be one of our shows, Squid, unless we talked about you-know-who. So lots of stuff swirling around. Some goalie movement this week with Montreal acquiring Jake Allen from St. Louis. Lots of names being bounded about. Poor old Freddie, I think, has been traded to 6 teams already in the last week. So what do you think?
Yeah.
Something's going to drop.
Well, something's got to happen. And I think I love Freddie, and as a person and as a goaltender. And I think the problem is he hasn't won a round yet with the Maple Leafs, and I think they're ready to move on. If they could pick up Leonard, who are some of the other
Oh, Matt Murray.
big name? Matt Murray, who's really been linked to the Maple Leafs. Carolina apparently are interested in Freddie, but they're not going to trade him there because they're not going to get a great goaltender in return. So if they can get Matt Murray in a separate trade, they'll probably move him and maybe get a defenseman or something like that. So, you know, where there's smoke, there's fire. And when you're hearing all these rumors from the insiders who generally have pretty good information, something's going to happen.
Yeah, and it's not unlike the Leafs to try and make a bit of a splash. So I think they're going to have some company. Everybody's aware of the issues they have with the hockey club. So they're not going to make it easy on Mr. Dubas and the rest of management. So once again, we'll sit back and watch with great interest. And I'm sure next week when we talk, something more will happen. And we'll watch with real interest, as I said. So guys, we want to thank you guys again. We want to thank our sponsor, the Hockey News, for giving us an opportunity to come to you and listening to us as you are. Now we're getting lots of great response back. So I want to thank you guys for that. Again, the Hockey News, visit thn.com/deal for a subscription to the great publication and all things pertaining to hockey. And guys, join us again next week. Our guest will be a very interesting character in the name of Bruce Boudreau.